Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Tuesday. It is April the 8th, and I appreciate you coming along for the ride. Today's episode is about Say Anything. The people that are willing to trade their credibility, willing to trade their scruples, their integrity for access. It's a real thing. It's a big deal. It is prominent here, both on the right and on the left, so we're going to cut both ways. But mostly I'm interested in people that are, quote unquote, in the movement, that are sort of on our side, as I'm told all the time. Someone referred to it as red on red. Well, we're going to do some red on red today. People who pretend to be part of one thing, pretend that they have, the capability of sussing out truth. And mostly what they do is they trade accuracy for audience. That's what I'm going to call it. Okay, so today's going to get a little bit ugly. But we're only going to talk about things that I think need to be discussed. And if you don't like it, that's okay too. We want to ask you to support the program. If you guys have the opportunity, or you do have the opportunity, there you go. You can find us. It's rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Go ahead and check that out. This is a one-man show, folks. You guys are seeing behind the scenes here. That's what it looks like. YouTube.com. It's /@Kyle Seraphin. If you want to follow us over there, make sure you like the program. Make sure you've subscribed and so on. Turn the notifications on. You can follow us over on KyleSeraphin.com. That's our locals community. Those folks are the best. We got some really good conversations that happen over there and a little bit behind the scenes access. And then if you want to share it on Spotify, if you're listening after the fact on Apple or something else, KyleSeraphinShow.com will allow you to not only listen to the program, it also gives you the opportunity to see the video, which, you know, there's a fair amount of work that goes into the video end of it, which you guys can probably tell. And if you guys want to be supportive of us on that end, I get the best sort of data from there. So this is what it looks like behind the scenes. You guys will get to see this every morning when I'm working on here. This is the command post that we do. And if you haven't seen it, go ahead and tune in. Check out over on Spotify. Check us out on the replay. All right. So today's first sponsor is the folks over at My Patriot Supply. You guys can find them at preparelikekyle.com. You have been hearing me talk about My Patriot Supply because we do trust them here in the Seraphin house. They are the folks that we have, 12 or something buckets full of food in case something bad happens. And here's something they haven't done before. This is their new sort of promotion that's coming up. It is the mega 3-month emergency food supply, but it's going to be the same price as the standard food kit, which is what I have, that 3-month, that 90-day supply. So you're going to get $360 worth of beef, of chicken, like real products, dehydrated and lasting for up to 25 years in storage, plus farm fresh fruits and vegetables. There's no additional charge for that. So what they're doing is they're taking the 25 or the 2,000 calorie a day and they're bumping it up to 2,500 calories per day. So you guys can have the best emergency food kit that you can buy for the money. Hands down. Okay. So when things go sideways, what you're going to want more than anything else, you want survival. You want to be able to be strong. You want to have energy. You want to have real food. This is an opportunity to be able to do that. This kit will be there when you need it. Stays fresh for up to 25 years in storage. Again, it's preparelikekyle.com. If you've been waiting for a reason to jump off the fence, when you've been waiting for an opportunity to build your ark, this is one way to go do it. Okay. You do it before the rains come. Might get ugly out there. So claim your mega emergency food kit today. It's a 90-day supply. Preparelikekyle.com. Like I said, I think this is a pretty solid deal. I did the analysis. I did the analysis on cost per calorie, and they even beat out things like Costco, but they've got a much bigger variety. So check them out, preparelikekyle.com. Let's jump into it today. All right, and we're not going to just dive into the main meat and potatoes and toss grenades into the camp as somebody said. You know what? I remember. I've got another video I got to grab too. Before we do, let's start with the first story of the day. I don't know why in the hell we are living in a timeline where all of the warnings of my childhood are now being played out as real stories as an adult. How many of you recall sci-fi movies kind of giving us the warning that maybe some technology should be approached with a little bit of discipline? You know, things like AI could kill us all if you put it in charge of automation, if you allow it to do something like, I don't know, run all the defense industry stuff. And now we've got AI drones, and I'm just waiting for the Terminator. If my wife and I have another male child, he's probably going to be named John Connor. I just think that's inevitable at this point. And this story is just one more example of this. It took longer because I grew up, remember seeing these in the 90s. A dire wolf has been revived through biotech company de-extinction process. And this couldn't go wrong ever, could it? Colossal Biosciences, even that sounds like a freaking 90s movie title. I don't like any of this at all. Has restored a long extinct canine species, a massive wolf. If you guys were fans of, what was that show? Game of Thrones. They had these back then in that sort of fantasy space. In a scientific breakthrough that could forever change how human beings interact with our planet, Colossal Biosciences has brought back an extinct animal that last walked the earth about 10,000 years ago. So before modern man really was doing anything. The dire wolf, based on the U.S. technologies. We have some ambitious goals of bringing back the extinct woolly mammoth. What the shit? People, what are we doing here? Is this real? Yes, of course it is. They think that they might be able to do a woolly mammoth by 2028. So by 2035, I guess we'll be fighting flippin' dinosaurs. Is that true? Listen, I just remember the warnings of Ian Malcolm. I can't get away from it. Haven't people thought about whether or not they should be doing this stuff? Whether there's a value in this? People who have wolves, by the way, they shoot wolves. They have full-time people that shoot wolves on oil pipelines so they don't destroy stuff. This is what the Tower of Babel was about. We actually had a biblical story about this for those of you that read. This is not a new story. Man aspires to the power of God and is almost always humbled. Here's a little taste of that from my childhood. Something that I remember. I read the books. They were very good. In fact, some of my favorite books. And just Michael Crichton was prophetic in many ways, a brilliant writer, in addition to just being a really good storyteller. Here's a great character, Ian Malcolm, who's sort of he's kind of the anti-hero of the Jurassic Park series, which if you only watch the movies, they are nothing like what the books were actually really serious warnings to human beings about playing with powers that are godlike. Here's Ian Malcolm giving, I think, one of the better sort of cautionary tales. And he does it in a great way, asking it in a very, very quotable manner.
Yeah, don't you see the danger, John, inherent in what you're doing here? Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun.
It's hardly appropriate to start hurling generalizations.
If I may, I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You know, you read what others had done, and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You want to sell it. Well,
I don't think you're giving us our due credit. Our scientists have done things which nobody's ever done before.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Right? Isn't that the question? It's not whether you can, it's whether you should. There's a lot of things that you can do, that you can muscle your way through, but should you do that thing? You might be able to use your audience to express certain opinions that you have, but should you? Should you be using it in that way? Is that a responsible use of your power? We always hear stories of great power and great responsibility, and when people kind of screw that up, it goes all the way back to the Greek myths. When you start rivaling the powers of God, or you start rivaling even the powers of strong men, if you do so irresponsibly, you are the villain. Pretty wild. The left has been strongly using a power called lawfare. They started the game. They're playing it. Luckily, we actually have intelligent people working in the Trump administration. I'm giving a lot of credit to Stephen Miller. I'm guessing that it's Stephen Miller. I don't have any special access to him other than I've talked to people who used to work with him. That's about as close as I ever got. But this is a victory. This is using the power. This is what happens. This is inevitable. Because when you use and wield power and you do so irresponsibly, inevitably it will swing back on you. Even if it's just the power of government. What we always know, this is like a universal law. Nobody is on top forever. There was I think it was Mark Twain, but you guys may have to correct me in the chat here, but there's a famous quote about the great families in America are always rising and falling. If you look, the wealthiest families that exist today are not the same at the founding of the country. They are not the same 100 years into the country. There's a couple that hang on, but generally speaking, people come in and out of power, in and out of wealth. We don't see the Bush family commanding nearly as much as they used to, right? Like there used to be a time when they could write their check. The Clintons have fallen out of favor. Nobody's particularly interested in what they're about. Chelsea Clinton is not going to be the same as a Hillary Clinton. These are things you can see in your own lifetime. And when you use a power of a sword, if you use executive power to cleave your way through things, what you're going to end up finding is eventually that power will catch up with you. The Supreme Court kind of reaffirmed that yesterday in kind of a fun way. And what we've seen from the Trump administration is using this thing called the Alien Enemies Act, which is a quote unquote old law, a pre-1800 U.S. law that was last used, as far as I can tell, in World War II. It's a Wartime Powers Act, allegedly, but also it gives you the opportunity to do something, declare a predatory invasion. And when you have smart people on your side who are going to dig deep into the archives and say, what would work in our favor? These people seem to be weaponizing law against us. Let's go find a law of our own. And they did. And yesterday in a 5-4 decision, which is referred to as a split decision because Amy Coney Barrett decided to side with all the other ladies. My take on that is that Amy Coney Barrett has been intimidated and is probably terrified of what she also had some lib sympathies to begin with, if we're being totally honest. If you listen to her confirmation hearing, and I've seen people replaying clips of this, talking about how she was very deeply incensed and upset about George Floyd dying, which is a crazy position. Yeah. On Monday, that's yesterday, the Supreme Court, it was in the afternoon actually, allowed the Trump administration to restart the deportations of illegal aliens. This is coming from CBS News. So they say migrants claim that they are members of the Venezuelan gang in a seldom invoked wartime authority, God forbid, but clarified that those subjects are subject to a judicial review. They are entitled to a review under the law. The question is what exactly can they actually deal with? I've got the decision in front of me here, so I'll actually pull that up real quick because I wanted to read from it. This is from the Supreme Court decision. This matter concerns the detention and removal of Venezuelan nationals believed to be members of TDA, Tren de Aragua, a entity that the United States State Department has designated as a foreign terrorist operation. According to federal regulations, they have the list of what it is. The president issued a proclamation, which is number 10903, invoking the Alien Enemies Act. There's the statute for it. 50 U.S.C. 21, which we've talked to you guys about. It is requiring them to detain and remove Venezuelan nationals who are, quote, members of TDA, end quote. Invocation of the Alien Enemies Act regarding the invasion of the United States by TDA under that particular statute and federal regulation. 5 detainees became a punitive class, sought injunction and declaratory relief against the implementation and their removal order under the proclamation. Blah, 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 blah. It gets kind of fun when it says, the Alien Enemies Act is provisionally certified class consisting of all non-citizens in U.S. custody who are subject to the proclamation. In other words, they certified this as a class. Okay? But that's not where it ends. It ends, let me pull this onto my screen where I can see it. The D.C. Circuit denied the government's emergency motions to stay the order. In other words, the D.C. Circuit would not allow the government to get rid of the TRO, the temporary restraining order, against their implementation. So it stopped them. We construe the TROs as appealable injunctions. The government has applied to have this thing vacated. We grant that application and we vacate the TROs. The Supreme Court got rid of the temporary restraining order on these deportations. The detainees seek equitable relief against the implementation of the proclamation and against their removal under the AEA, Alien Enemies Act. And they challenge the government's interpretation of the act. The problem is that the Supreme Court says we do not reach those arguments. The challenge is under the removal of the AEA, a statute which largely, quote unquote, precludes judicial review. Do you remember me telling you those words not too long ago? Ledecky versus Watkin, a 1948 Supreme Court case. They brought it and they said basically you only can bring a habeas charge. It's the only cause of action available to challenge deportation under the immigration statutes. And the finding was that they precluded judicial intervention beyond what was necessary to vindicate that due process was in fact served. And due process doesn't have to mean that they go through the federal court system. There can actually be an administrative judge through the DEHS and so on, which didn't exist back then. In any case, It's a narrow win, but a win nonetheless for the Trump administration to continue throwing people out of this country that don't belong in the country. They're wielding a sword. The left tried to wield a sword, and they found out eventually that sword comes back on you. Here's another little thing that actually goes in the favor of the Trump administration. They were being told that they had to fix the mistaken deportation of a man who was declared to be part of TDA or MS-13, in this case MS-13. They said, you got to get him back. ABC News reporting. Judge said that he has to be returned to the United States. And the Supreme Court said, let's just put a pin in that for a minute. We'll just think about it. They're not going to go and bring him back in right away. And that's okay, too. So you have 2 wins on the immigration front. And they're going to keep having these wins, is my guess, because the way that the political left is trying to talk about this crazy stuff is not a win. Here is a defender of the Republic, defender of illegal aliens, not picker of cotton, dollar store Cardi B, Jasmine Crockett, letting people know what immigrants in this country really do and how they built it and how black people aren't going to pick cotton no more. I'm not kidding you. This is the take that is being floated out there. She was at a Baptist church, and you can hear people kind of get slightly weirded out when she starts doing this. Again, she's doing her fake ghetto routine. This is not a winning argument. It won't be a winning argument with regular people. I hope they continue to do it. This is why I actually don't feel bad about tossing some grenades at people that are grifting on the political right, because the left is not organized. This is the voice that they have that is so prominent.
So I had to go around the country and educate people about what immigrants do for this country, or the fact that we are a country of immigrants.
Right.
The fact is, ain't none of y'all trying to go and farm right now. Okay, so I'm lying. Raise your hands. You're not. We done picking cotton. We are. You can't pay us enough to find a plantation.
I know that's right.
Actually, that's not true, because if you guys have seen any of these videos, people go around and ask what it would take to pick cotton and how much you're doing. And people, you listen to, it doesn't matter whether it's a white guy or a black guy at a Walmart. You offer the right wage, it turns out, people will do it. And the joke is if you ask them, for a certain amount of money, they're going to sing the slave songs too. I've seen these videos; they're really funny. People are like, "Oh yeah, man, I'm singing the songs." He's like, "You singing the songs?" Yeah. Because if there's a certain rate, and the job has nobility, like it's a thing that's needed, people will do it. Most of you will do that kind of work in your own yard, will you not? How many of you would like to actually farm your own space at this point? We're actually going back to that, where people want that self-reliance, where they look down the pipe of what the government's going to offer them and go, you know what? I'm just not buying into the proposition here that we're getting a fair deal. I'd rather keep more things, grow more things with my own hands, and not have to pay you for them, not have to pay anybody else, not have to import them from somewhere else. That'd be good. Wouldn't it be nice? It'd be nice if we could have that. We're going to talk a little bit about tariffs, because that needs to be discussed today just a little bit. We're hearing people kind of on both sides of the aisle. I'm seeing people on the right also. Nobody wants temporary pain. Isn't that the most American thing in the world? Look, I'm not a huge defender of any of this stuff, and I don't pretend to be the master of any markets, but I know that I've built a pretty strong net worth, and it didn't even take a hit. I didn't even lose money when I didn't have a job, because we were able to we just cut all the dead weight in our life. Our family, for better or for worse, has at least a reasonable understanding of what money is. And what I've discovered over the last, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years, is that a lot of Americans do not know what money is. They're in significant debt. They make terrible financial decisions. Every time I read a story, which many of you have read as well, that Americans could not handle a $400 setback. And I hope that it's not all of you listening out there, but if it is, start today and build a cushion and cut whatever you need to do. In my case, I had to cut a house. I thought my family was going to live in a 20-foot RV with a family of 6, because that's what it was going to take for us not to go broke. That's a really, really hard decision to tell your pregnant wife. And yet, the alternative is that you're subservient, that you cash your checks on behalf of somebody else, that you can't make decisions based on principle. And that's where we're going to get into the grift people. These folks that have sold out all of their credibility, because they're living a lifestyle that's fancy and expensive, and the only way to continue it is to sell out people's trust. So I don't like that. And I don't want to be that person. If you don't understand how money works, it can come back and it will haunt you. It will bite you for sure. This is This is Scott Besson talking about where money lives and who doesn't have it. And half of this country has none. They are upside down, and they are slaves to debt. And some of these things are their own choices. So at any point in time in your life, you can tighten your belt, have austerity, which means that you're not going to have all the things you want. There's a lot of things that I would love to have, but I don't. There's a lot of things that many of you would love to have. Fancy vacations, nicer cars, more expensive, fancier clothes, maybe better guns. I don't know what it is. Like, there's something out there that you have foregone because it is not the right move financially. It is a irresponsible decision. And then when you can afford it, maybe you do. And good for you. I got no beef with people driving things that are nice if you can afford it, if you're not going to charge me for it. But when we hear about these stories about a lady who's got a 2024 BMW and she's also getting $4,000 worth of food stamps and food subsidies, and you see those TikToks go viral, and she's very upset that someone's going to take away her government entitlement because she's not doing her job, that's nauseating to us. Because how many of you have gone without something like that? Probably a lot. Here's Scott Besson kind of explaining why people are going to be panicky. Listen, I see a market downturn, and I've seen it. I've probably lost, I don't know, like $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, depending on between my wife and I, in not real money, in unrealized gains. Right? Nobody came in my house and took something away from me that I now don't have anymore. Nobody went into my bank account and ripped it out. It was fantasy money. We're playing in the big lottery machine. We're playing in the big casino that's called the market, whether it be in mutual funds or direct stocks. And now they're worth less than they were before, but you still have the same number of them. So the valuation has changed. So what? For some of you, that's a big deal because that's where you're hedged. And maybe that tells you something about where your investments are. And some of you, it's not even relevant at all. In fact, this is an opportunity. If you're under the age of probably 50, this is a buying opportunity for you. Here's Scott Besson kind of explaining that most Americans are not actually in that position. 50% of Americans not only don't have any money in the market, they don't have any money, period. They have negative money. And that's the thing to correct. The only way you correct that is they have to individually make more difficult decisions, which is hard. And I don't know what those are going to look like for them. But everybody I know, even the people that don't have any money, they have cars, don't they? When I had no money, I had feet. And I'm not just saying that. That's like an old school kind of thing to say as a throwback, but I'm not kidding you. When I lived in Los Angeles, I went from having negative $500 in my bank account and no money whatsoever, and student loan debt, by the way, and no job, none. Like sleeping on the floor, which is not a woe is me story. It's like I made terrible decisions, and it ended up with hungry for a week, sleeping on tile floors with nowhere to go and no idea what was coming next. The minute that I got a job, the first thing I did was build a safety cushion, because that sucks. And anybody who's ever been in the military, who's had to sleep on the ground, once you realize that and you're like, man, I'd rather take a little bit of comfort with me and stuff that in my pack, because comfort is worth the discomfort of carrying it around. Okay. It turns out that safety nets financially is worth the discomfort of not having all the things you want. So I had a motorcycle, and I'm just making my own example here before we do the Scott Besson clip. I had a motorcycle that I paid $200 for, and it sometimes ran, which means sometimes I could take it to work. But oftentimes I walked like 2 or 3 miles to work. No big deal. That's not a big deal. It's nice. I was outside of Los Angeles, so it was beautiful. It was in Burbank. And sometimes I walked down and I caught the train or the bus. There was a free shuttle. I got a job that had a free shuttle that would take you to all the movie studios, so I could do that, because I could put away money like crazy, and I stacked it up. And I've never been broke since then. Not once, since I was 26, 27 years old. So is that the same as walking uphill in the snow? As some of you guys are giving me a hard time. It's like, no, it's not a walking uphill story in the snow. This is a modern tale of like a guy who had a college degree, who had all the benefits of going to private schools when I was in high school. My parents loved me. They stayed together. They're still married. All of those good things worked for me. And I still made enough bad decisions that I didn't have anything, and then I went and fixed it because it was not good. It was my fault. It was always my fault. Here's Scott Besson, and he doesn't blame anybody. And you're hearing Tucker Carlson saying, well, we got to fix it for these people. No. Give them an opportunity to fix it, and they need to fix it for themselves. So that's my statement to you guys about financial responsibility. And it's why I'm never going to end up taking money from like the people that want to go be the Epstein binder crowd, which we're going to talk about later. All right, hold on. We got to play the clip. I just had it up and then I put it away. Sorry, I was looking at you guys in the chat. Here's the clip.
The distribution of equities across households, the top 10% of Americans own 88% of equities, 88% of the stock market. The next 40% owns 12% of the stock market. The bottom 50 has debt. They have credit card bills. They rent their homes. they have auto loans, and we've got to give them some relief.
That's the message right there. Just as a bystander, I'm like, wow, okay.
You don't have to give anybody any relief. You do have to give them some wiggle room to do it. And one of the ways you're going to get wiggle room is tightening our belts, and things are going to get ugly. And that's just the nature of tariffs. I've been watching the tariff market fly. This is how you know people are desperate and they make terrible decisions. If you're following an X post and that allows you to see a multi-trillion-dollar market swing, this is the story that's coming from NPR, how a false X post over on X Twitter managed to swing the market trillions of dollars. It tells you everything you need to know about what people do and don't know. A lot of people dove in. If you're getting your stock tips from an anonymous account on X, give me a break. The relief that you need is wiggle room, is an opportunity. And it turns out that I think that when stocks drop down, you can actually buy into something. That means you have to have cash available. If you don't, wait for the next one. There will always be another dip. It always happens. It happened whenever there was a Democrat in. It turns out it happens when you start making difficult decisions. So we're in the difficult decision period right now. What's funny is Donald Trump has never been shy about this stuff. He's been talking about it since I was in high school. Here's a clip from 1995. This is Donald Trump talking 30 years ago, very simply, about why he thinks the United States gets played and why we need to do stuff like tariffs. And these are compelling arguments only because, if nothing else, have they been done before? Let's try something new. How about we try something different? Because a lot of people have been cruising along in debt. They look, I mean, how many people do you look around and you know, you're like, damn, they've got nice cars, they got a nice house. And then meanwhile, they're screaming at their wife every night because they are leveraged to their eyeballs in debt that they can barely afford to pay. And they have to do things like, I don't know, hunt down J6ers. They got to hunt them down because if they lose that paycheck for 1 month, and I know this for a fact, having worked with federal agents, they are this far away from insolvency at any given moment. And if you are that far away from not being able to meet your bills, if you don't have a 6-month slush fund that's sitting there that says, I can pay my mortgage, I can pay my food, my kids aren't going to go hungry, no one's going to come and repo my car because I either own it outright or it's a very manageable payment, all those things. If you don't have that going on, you work for whoever tells you to do something, and that's when atrocities happen. This is the common thread in the suspendals, by the way. None of us are wealthy people. None of us. Not Garrett O'Boyle, not Steve Friend, not Marcus Allen, Steve Baker. None of us are wealthy. We're not. Every single person there, though, has made financial decisions that are less fun, but it allowed us to say, if they take this job, I'm going to stand up and be someone of integrity. Again, Donald Trump is talking about trying something new. How about that? How about we just try something different? Sometimes you ought to do that, especially if people are so willing. If you're willing to see trillions of dollars change hands, which means a bunch of people made a bet on something stupid because it was a false X post, why not try tariffs if that's what needs to be done? I'm actually in the camp of let's wait and see. But the guy hasn't been like not thinking about this for the last 30 years.
I couldn't believe this last auto deal as an example. Here we are, we're sitting there. It's restricted in Japan. Everything's restricted. We're sitting, they can't come in. And all of a sudden, this country falls. We do the old fold now. I've never seen it.
That isn't the way the press reported it. Well, no. The press reported it that we had a deal.
And then all of a sudden it turned out that the deal turned out that it was not a good deal for us. And we had all the cards. I mean, it's not like we didn't have the cards. It's like, keep your cars out of here until you open up. That's all. Keep your cars out. And then the first hour was like, oh, we made this wonderful deal. After about 15 seconds after that, people realized we got duped. I just don't understand it.
What's wrong with us? I mean, I guess they said, well, this would hurt American car dealers.
You know, what's wrong with us? I don't know. They're afraid politically to make a little bit of a tough stand. That wasn't even a tough one. That was a no-brainer. You would have had the Japanese cars out for 19 and a half seconds, and you would have won every single point. It's the most incredible failure in negotiation that I've seen. But it happens all the time. I just don't understand it. So I would take a much harder stand. I'd take a much more difficult stand, I would say. Make a couple of enemies. I think I'd make a lot of friends, ultimately.
If the United States...
All right, so there's more to it. I may actually go post that over on Locals. It's a pretty good clip. I pulled that from Mazemore, another person I follow over on X who does a great job digging into the historical. So yeah, here's the thing. Short term, you're going to upset people. If people are playing the daily market, I listened to PBD, Patrick, what's his name? Patrick Bet-Davis, who's out there talking. Did I get that right? I think I did. PBD podcast guy. He's out talking about if you're an active investor, like you're checking the markets every day and you're managing it 24/7, that's a different animal. Yeah, they're going to lose some money. They're going to be upset. They're going to speculate. They're going to short, do all that. If you're a passive investor, like most people are, which means every month they're contributing to a 401k or something like that, or you buy into stocks when you have the money to do it, or you get a tip and you want to do it, and one of your friends friends wants to go and own a piece of a company, or you hear it's doing well, so you decide, like, you're the person that's in the casino that's putting money on the table that gets taken. Patrick Bet David, right? Yeah, all right. So, and they're getting the worst possible information. I've got a really funny little clip that shows that the quote unquote fake news, they talked about that 90-day, the reason that things were manipulated was floated out that there was going to be a 90-day pause on the tariffs, which made a bunch of people go like, oh, well, if it's going to pause, then we're good. But it turns out you have to kind of like commit to this plan. You have to, if this is a bluff, which I don't think it is, it's a strong play, you got to just do it. You've got to cut all the way in. And I'm fairly confident the White House is there. They may have floated this out as a fun way to see how people would react to it. Or somebody that's an enemy to this policy put it out there. This is CNBC covering the 90-day pause fake news, which swung the markets by a lot.
Tells me it is quote unquote fake news that the White House is considering a 90-day pause. So the White House pouring cold water on this idea, wherever it came from, that they're considering a 90-day pause on tariffs, saying that the president is committed to his tariff regime, and any reports that he's considering a 90-day pause are quote fake news. That from the White House press secretary on the record just a short time ago to me on the cell phone here as we try to sort through where this came from and why it is that the market became convinced that that might be a possibility. The White House saying it is not a possibility, Carl.
Okay, fine. So there you go. Not a possibility. Maybe don't take your stop tips from somewhere on Twitter. Maybe don't get conned. Don't be easily persuaded by people if you can't vet the source. One of the other things you might want to do is not have your information available to complete randos on the internet. This is one way you can protect yourself against that. It's patriot-protect.com/KYLE. That's going to be the promo code that saves you 15% on the annual subscription. Data breaches are a problem. They're a problem in the private sector and in the public sector. Newsweek had a story about them in February, talking about millions of Americans having their background checks and their drug tests being accessed. And that means that criminals can buy your private information. That means they get access to things like full name, social security number, home address, phone numbers, and so on. That can be debilitating. That is a crime, and it's not your fault. But you can also take some measures to protect yourself. If you want to do that sort of thing, you want to make sure that criminals cannot impersonate you, take out loans in your name, drain your bank accounts, access all your stuff fraudulently. You might want to protect yourself with something like Patriot Protect. Again, it's patriot-protect.com/KYLE. They run a blackout service at the moment where they're looking into the dark web. We guys have heard this. This is where people are selling and buying information and credit card numbers and social security and so on. They scan that, try to find it, and get it taken down. And additionally, they're also doing this thing called the search and destroy protocol, which removes your personal information from hundreds of different data broker websites. If you've been part of a data breach, then there's a very high likelihood that one of these data brokers is out there putting your name out. It makes you searchable in Google. It's very easy to find who you are, who's related to you, and all the other kind of information to protect yourself and to keep yourself away from scams and cyber hackers and criminals and all the other kind of scumbags out there that want to take what you've built up. Make sure you have a service that protects it, and one you can do, and the one we have is patriot-protect.com/KYLE. There's a link in the show description so you guys can find out what that is. We're going to keep pressing onward. I got a couple other little things. False market. Let's do more on tariffs just for a little bit. This is the story that kind of linked me into it. How about kind of funny hearing why the left has no credibility in this space? I just had this funny little clip, and it's going to come into more play later. This is why I don't think this is a danger right now to be talking about people doing a bad job. Why I don't mind kind of talking about, hey, the possibility is that these tariffs work really well, because I'm hearing the other side crying about it. Jake Tapper making a claim on CNN the other day that he's not on the left. And the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, is like, wait, what? So if you got bad information coming out at you and the people are willing to lie to your face, like a CNN type, Jake Tapper, definitely not a leftist. Can anyone else validate that? Can Jake Tapper validate that in real life? Here's a little taste of that.
You've got 2 days of data. Everyone, especially on your side, on the left, is freaking out.
I'm not on the left.
But at the end of the day, listen, this whole concept, all right, Jake, thank you. This whole concept is about rebuilding an American economy around American goods.
Okay, what does the rebuild look like, though? It has to be a hard reset, which means you have to have a foundation and a ground, which means you're going to lose ground, right? I think that's inevitable. I think that's where we're at right now. I've got Victor Davis Hanson, who I think is brilliant, asking some very, very poignant questions that we're going to have to articulate in a minute. Listen to Howard Lutnick. This is the Commerce Secretary talking about a reset. Okay, if you want to give people an opportunity, you have to have a starting ground. So his argument is that we are going to, things are going to cost more. Things are going to change around. We're going to basically rejigger the relationships that are happening globally with the United States when it comes to trade. All of these things land with me, by the way. All of these things make perfect sense, at least to me. that the people we're talking about right now are not fools. They're people who have a lot of money, that have a big understanding of what it is, and they're trying something that Americans generally don't want to do. Everybody said you could never do this stuff, by the way, because Americans won't take the temporary pain, that it's too hard. It's too hard to get reelected when there's temporary pain like this. And Donald Trump can't be reelected. Regardless of what he says about a third term, he can't be reelected. So a reset with someone who's got what? Nothing to lose. This is the last term. You can throw the pass, see what happens, run the play, see where it goes. Here's Howard Lutnick.
The point is you need to reset the power of the United States of America and reset it against all our allies and our enemies alike. The idea that all the countries of the world can run trade surpluses with America and buy our things with us. Remember, $1.2 trillion. In 1980, we were a net investor, meaning we owned more of the rest of the world than they owned of us.
Yeah, it's a different world.
And now,
it's a different market.
now they own $18 trillion of us net. So that means the rest of the world, every year when we run a $1.2 trillion deficit, the rest of the world buys $1.2 trillion of America, and it goes up and up and up. And eventually, we're not going to own America, and we are going to be owned by the rest of the world. Imagine if we had a war and we can't build a ship, we can't fly a plane, we can't build our own planes, we don't have our own semiconductors. This is what the president is here to fix for America. It's in his hands, and he wants to fix America. This is his chance to fix America. And
Okay, understood. But I'd like to interrupt you with my points, which is that I just want to undermine everything you're doing, which is what these people keep doing. That was CBS doing the coverage there. Now you're going to get a little bit from Yahoo Finance, which they have a pretty fancy looking set, although the purple kind of turns me off. And another smart guy with a lot of money. This is Kevin O'Leary talking about it, and he very kind of deftly kind of weaves his way through answering the question in a way that they don't want to hear the answer. What they want to hear is that we screwed up and we're going to stop because we want you to take a loss. But the fact is you got to just come out the other end of this thing. So temporary pain, anybody who's ever had to like cut their budget and you had to do without some things, it's like, okay, we're not going to go out to dinner this month at all. Christians do it during Lent on the regular basis, don't they? My grandfather was famous for giving up alcohol. And as far as I can tell, he was a like functional alcoholic. And so every Lent, he was miserable and cranky because he was going through withdrawals, and he did it cold turkey every single Lent. You know? He was miserable to be around. It wasn't fun. Nobody really wanted him to do it, as far as I can tell. But it's doable, and you came out the other side and you survived for, almost 90 years. You could do it. It's doable if you have the tenacity to push through to the other end. Here's Kevin O'Leary talking about it when they're trying to jam him up. Hey, did you screw up? And he's like, no. Hold on.
I want to start on these tariffs. The market is on track right now for its worst weekly performance since March of 2020. How do you continue to be an advocate for these tariffs, given the sell-off we're seeing, given that I have had every source on our show this morning say that these tariffs will be causing a recession in the United States?
They don't know that yet. They don't know how long the tariff's going to be on. We've never done this before. We've never taken on the entire globe. Usually it's done in trade agreements with specific countries, such as NAFTA, which was Canada and Mexico, or a European Union situation. This is unique, over 60 countries. Now, there's two aspects to these tariffs. Number one is reciprocality against tariffs from one country to another based on products and services that are specific. So if you're charging a 20% tariff in India, it's going to be reciprocated in the United States. And those go away pretty quickly. That actually leads to fair trade. The more complex aspect of these negotiations are around the idea of trade imbalances. And so when you put on tariffs to try and fix trade imbalance, it's difficult because the largest economy on earth is the United States. So really you're starting a behemoth negotiation, and it's happening in every country. You highlighted Canada, but you might as well talk about Britain or even Switzerland, where I am right now, where they have over 30% tariffs imposed 48 hours ago. And so you can assume that behind the scenes are two spheres of negotiations. One is, let's try and reduce the imbalance of trade by buying more stuff from the United States. That's one signal. And the other, which is very easy to fix, is simply remove all tariffs. If you're going to have reciprocal tariffs at 20%, 30%, 40%, just get rid of them, bring them down to zero.
He's giving the argument on how you make it go away, which is really easy. And by the way, if America can withstand it, then the other side has to go and capitulate. And it turns out, as the largest consumer on the globe, you got some leverage there. right? You got a little bit of opportunity to do that. By the way, he mentioned the things that went on with NAFTA. I remember those negotiations. Many of you will as well. Here's a little discussion about NAFTA, and this is the same time that they were doing that. They were also opening up trade with China. Bill Clinton looking to bring China into the WTO. Basically, everything that he said was a complete inverse of what actually ended up happening. When I was a kid, for whatever it's worth, in the 80s, Michael Crichton, again, a throwback to my little first clip that played some Jurassic Park rather. There was a book called Rising Sun. Do you guys remember that? They made a movie out of it with Sean Connery. Do you know what? Do you know what the purpose and the storyline in that book was? It was an alarmist take on the superiority of Japanese electronic companies. Do you know that? In my lifetime, the fear was that the Japanese would overtake America and become a super nation that ran the entire globe because they were so good at doing something. And they weren't wrong about this, by the way. The Japanese were willing to do something called incrementalism, and Americans wanted to do quantum leap. In other words, Americans wanted to buy a VCR. And then they wanted to buy the next thing, a laser disc. And then they wanted to buy a CD or a DVD player. They wanted to do technology quantum leaps. Whereas the theory was the Japanese were more successful because they would buy a VCR, and then there would be a faster speed VCR with buffering, and they would buy that. And then there'd be a better VCR that would have better inputs or outputs on the back of it, and they would buy that. And so they would incrementally increase their capabilities, and so they would slowly move their technology ahead. And that slow and steady progression was better than the American quantum leap requirements. And that's why the Japanese were going to destroy us. I want you to look around the globe right now. Japanese products, do they destroy all American products? No. Have we had quantum leaps forward? Yeah. Did the American system win? Why? Because it's bigger. And they have some kind of weird fetish problem, and they have a negative birth rate. Bill Clinton's talking about the problem that we thought was not going to be an issue. We thought they were going to be our super helper, remember? Between Nixon to Clinton, everybody thought the Chinese were going to make Americas have all these options. And what it did is it made us addicted to cheap, crappy goods. People always ask me, like, oh, what do you think about that thing? And my answer is almost always, it's like, well, it's Chinesium. Chinesium is the element on the periodic table that makes up shitty Chinese products. And you all have Chinesium all around you. So do I. In this room, there is plenty of Chinesium. The light stands I use, the lighting that we use for the podcast, Chinesium. Okay, the speakers are Chinesium, as far as I can tell. The arms that hold up my monitors are Chinesium. At some point, we're going to have to spend more money if you want Americans to actually have jobs, and if you want to do it fairly. And by the way, they make our stuff not compete. Here's Bill Clinton again, wrong a long time ago.
The WTO agreement will move China in the right direction. It will advance the goals America has worked for in China for the past 3 decades. And of course, it will advance our own economic interests. Economically, this agreement is the equivalent of a one-way street. It requires China to open its markets with a fifth of the world's population, potentially the biggest markets in the world, to both our products and services in unprecedented new ways. All we do is to agree to maintain the present access which China enjoys. Chinese tariffs from telecommunications products to automobiles to agriculture will fall by half or more over just 5 years. For the first time, our companies will be able to sell and distribute products in China made by workers here in America without being forced to relocate manufacturing to China, sell through the Chinese government, or transfer valuable technology.
Oops, that didn't work out really well, did it? Go figure. All right, folks, make sure you're liking the video over on Rumble if you're watching it. We're obviously getting kind of crushed down over there as far as censorship goes, but that doesn't mean that you can't go out there and approve it. Same thing for those of you on YouTube. We're finally growing over there, youtube.com/@Kyle Seraphin. We appreciate all of you guys. So make sure you're checking in on those spaces, and it'd be great if you would be willing to hit the like button and subscribe and notify yourself and so on. Those things can be done. If you're on Spotify, leave us a remark or a 5-star review over on Apple. All these things, very appreciated. I got two little debunks here. The question should be this: who should have access to the American worker? By the way, Bill Clinton getting it almost exactly wrong. Nobody's going to relocate the factories. Is that right? Is that what they said? Here's Stephen Miller, our only person that I believe is actually probably playing like legitimately 4D chess, and Trump is listening to him, so that's good. And he's asking the question: fundamentally, who should have priority to American markets? Should it be American companies? Or should it be Chinese companies, as Bill Clinton set up for us?
who should have priority access to the U.S. market? Should it be the factory that's located in Cleveland, or should it be the factory that's located in Beijing? That's the fundamental question. The radical left corporate media, the globalist corporate media that is attempting to criticize this plan take the view that the best place to put your factory should be in Beijing or Shanghai or Bangkok or anywhere but the United States of America. The president's view is we should do everything in our power to make it so that the best place to put your factory is in an American town. So we get all the benefit. We get the economic benefit, we get the social benefit, we get the community benefit, and most importantly, we get the national security benefit of having our critical industries here in America. And that's why we're calling it Liberation Day, because he is freeing us from a global economic system that has made us subservient to foreign nations and foreign powers.
How simple is that? Okay, I'm going to give you the final question here that I think Victor Davis Hanson encapsulates quite well. How in the world do other nations, which have significant tariffs on American goods, survive? How do they do that? How can you survive having huge tariffs and thrive? It turns out that this argument is very telling to me, because I do know that all these countries behind the scenes are all jacking up the price of American goods. How did they survive when some of the things they require come from America? Pretty simple. Here's VDH, as my buddy Charlie calls him, the great one.
China are so destructive of their economies. Why is China booming? How did India become an economic powerhouse when it has these exorbitant tariffs on American imports? How did Vietnam, of all places, become such a different country, even though it has these prohibitive tariffs? Why isn't Germany, before its energy problems, why wasn't it a wreck? It's got tariffs on almost everything that we send them. How is the EU even functioning with these tariffs? I thought tariffs destroyed an economy, but they seem to like them. And they're angry that they're no longer asymmetrical. Apparently, our people who are tariffing us think tariffs improve their economy. Maybe they're right. I don't know. The second thing is, why would you get angry at the person who is reacting to the asymmetrical tariff and not the people who inaugurated the tariff? Why is Canada mad at us when it's running a $63 billion surplus and it has tariffs on some American products at 250%? Doesn't it seem like the people who started this asymmetrical, if I could use the word trade war, should be the culpable people, not the people who are reluctantly reacting to it? China has All
right, so that looped in, but yeah, right? Who started this? This goes back to World War II. This goes back to this American exceptionalism where we thought we had to rebuild the whole globe. That was actually the scary part that people are actually talking about in the 80s, about how the Japanese, we rebuilt them and now they're going to overtake us. That's not what happened. So, most people, when it comes to things that are very, very slow moving, like supply chains and global logistics and the global markets, which 50% of Americans have absolutely no play in. They don't have any money in it. They don't even have money to begin with. They have negative money. You know, I'm a big deep breath kind of guy when it comes to financial stuff. Every single crash that I've seen in my lifetime, it's gone back. You know, it's sprung back at some point in time. Housing collapses and so on. Take your time. If you're old and you don't have any choice, I get it. That is a bigger deal. This is something that's happening immediately. That's happening right now. We've all been expecting wins. This is a different topic. We're gonna go into the grenade throwing. So if you guys want to share this program, this might be the part you cut. If you want to go ahead and create some strife out there, we're gonna take some appropriate shots at people who need to be called out. The Tennessee Star is the news organization, local and state news, that was suing for years to get access to Audrey Hale, the Covenant school shooter, the so-called Tranifesto writer. They were trying to get access to this Covenant school shooter manifesto for years and couldn't get it. And the Justice Department said that it was so damaging and so dangerous that they could not release it. There were 6 people killed and it would cause I don't know what. You got Kash Patel on here as the new FBI director, as the new ATF director as well, in an acting role. And he apparently decided to release it. But not to the Tennessee Star, who's had this lawsuit for a very long time, who this is local news to. Decided to release it to who? Oh, a pretty blonde lady. This is Jesse Kelly with Megyn Kelly. We'll also talk about Julie Kelly. I don't know why the Kellys are on there. The only one I like is Jesse. But he says, you seem to get some pretty juicy exclusives. Why did the newspaper that's been suing for the release of this for years and is now suing to find out why they didn't get it, why did they get scooped on their own story by a pretty blonde lady who had a big fight publicly with Trump and has now come out as like the ultimate Trumper nonstop? Because everybody that I see in the media space on the right, if they want to have access to a Kash Patel, to a Dan Bongino, to a Pam Bondi, to Stephen Miller, if they want to have access, they have to kiss ass. They have to trade their accuracy, their credibility. They have to trade their integrity so that they can get near the story. Because access equals exclusive, and exclusive equals clicks, and clicks equal money. That's how you monetize it. If you guys don't know how we do this, the more of you that watch, the more that I can ask for an ad when I go and read them. And I only do 2 or 3 per show. But if we have documented views of you watching, then access to you, the audience, is how we make money here. That's the deal that we have. Do you know that? That's the deal. You listen to a couple of commercials because they know that if you're listening to what I have to say for 60 to 75 minutes a day and you think that that's interesting to you, you'll also be interested in the products that I'm willing to represent to you. And you know what? I take that really seriously. So I only have products that I actually think are useful or that I would spend my own money on. That's why I've got a Patriot cooler sitting right next to me. I mean, it's why I have silent bags on the floor that keep my phones quiet. I would rather go out and just find things that I already have in my house and have them represent through you. It's why we have Blackout Coffee back there behind me. These are things that we find of value. That's the deal when it comes to advertising. How do you get juicy exclusives, though, so you can bump those numbers up? You bump them up by being somebody who drops down to your knees for the administration. And it's very interesting to me, if you guys saw our thumbnail, a lot of them tend to be mediocre, mid-rate, very generic-looking blonde women. And maybe it's because I'm not a blonde guy. My wife is a brunette. Sorry for all you people that are blonde. Like, everybody has a taste, but I don't get it. There's this boomer instinct that shows up across Fox News that if they can get a generic-looking, pretty-ish blonde lady of any age between 70 and 30, they will put them in front of you and have them say words to you, and people will just go, oh my God, it's amazing. Nicole Parker knows nothing about the FBI, was useless in the FBI, was known as Rat Face in the Miami field office. Didn't know anything, didn't do anything, worked in a position of complete uselessness. Julie Kelly, somebody who found her time doing what? Shilling for fucking Monsanto? Excuse my language, but shilling for Monsanto in the era of RFK Jr. going out and doing the Make America Healthy Again. And she didn't get a catch on that, even though her husband was promoting it and they're millionaires. Then she decided, I bet I could do a MAGA grift. And in the meantime, all of her dollars that she's getting, she's turning around and supporting Democrats. Or her husband is, either way, the big money in their house. How is it that people decided to go for that? Because we've chosen these heroes and they represent my opinion. I trust Dan Bongino. I trust Kash Patel. I trust Julie Kelly. I trust Megyn Kelly. I believe in Liz Wheeler. I know that DC Drano's never let me down. Cat Turd speaks for me. All of these fools, they've all traded all their credibility, even if they had some in the beginning, because they had original takes or humor, and I'm sure there's plenty of that. At some point, they realize, oh boy, there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money to be able to sell it out. And I've talked to big influencers that you know the names of, and they're like, yeah, I get offers in my inbox and I take them. People say, hey, would you, promote this thing? And they do it for the stupidest amount of money, folks, you can imagine. They do it for $200 a tweet to reach 1 million of you. I'm not even kidding. $50 a tweet. Sometimes they do it just to maintain friendship with the people that are going to give them these scoops. And this is Megyn Kelly talking about her juicy scoop.
You always seem to get your hands on some good, juicy exclusives. Let's talk about the manifesto, the Nashville manifesto. Everyone remembers that terrible school shooting with that tranny shooter, and it was bad. Well, the FBI tried to hide it. You got your hands on it. What happened?
Yeah. Biden's FBI tried to hide it and did hide it. And the Nashville police were keeping it behind, locked doors. And it wasn't until Trump and Kash Patel got in charge and took over the FBI that they finally made sure it got out there. And, they gave us permission to reveal that they're the ones who gave it to us, the FBI. And so we have it, and we went through it, and it's 1,000+ pages, and it's deep.
And the only condition is that we have to just say it's because of the great transparency and the wonderful work of Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, the same people that are like the same FBI that has 2 new managers and essentially the entire same staff. Do you guys realize that we are now putting lipstick on the pig in the form of 2 people that I've advocated for? I want them to be successful. I really do. They have to cut throats and they're not doing it. Look at this. You want to see something that makes you kind of want to just kind of puke? You remember if cutesy time is over? Is this not the definition of cutesy time? I don't take a lot of shots at people, but I'll just go out there on a limb right now. And people have told me I shouldn't say this, but I don't give a shit. I'm going to suggest to you that Dan Bongino is sitting behind a podcast desk before January 1st, 2026. I bet you he's gone. I think that he leaves the FBI because he doesn't have the ability to do the thing that he thought he was going to do. And so now he's part of cutesy time. Remember the don't get dead guy? How tough he is? Everybody thinks Dan Bongino, tough, New York City cop, talks big, MMA. One time he told me he carries 3 guns in his gun bag. He sent me that as a private text, and I was like, I don't understand. I just carry magazines. What the hell are you talking about? Why are you carrying multiple guns? That tells me you're not a gun guy. You don't get it. He sent me some of the guns he's got, pictures of them. He's got a Terran Tactical, like a Pit Viper or a Sand Viper. It's awesome. It's an awesome looking gun. Okay, you can afford $8,000 guns. He's a multimillionaire now. This is why you don't put multimillionaires in these kind of positions. And now he's going to have a security detail. That's what you're seeing. NBC reporting it. I already knew this, by the way. FBI is going to create a multi-agent bodyguard team to protect Dan Bongino. Up to 20 agents will be required for a full-time protective detail. He could have chose, like every other deputy director, to just carry a gun. I met several deputy directors. The one that I liked most was David Bowditch. I met him very briefly. I had like a 2-minute conversation with him at one point. He was funny. He's a big guy. Dan's a big guy. And he was carrying a gun, and I could see it print in his suit. It was sitting there on his right hip, and he was carrying a Glock 22, the 40 caliber gun that I was issued right out of Quantico. And he had 2 guys with him. He had 2 special assistants. They were both special agents. If a 3-man team of special agents cannot handle the problem coming your way, you're probably screwed. Why are we putting 20 people on you night and day, covering down on your whole family and making sure they follow you everywhere and putting you in a motorcade? Give me a freaking break, man. I thought Dan was supposed to be the big tough guy. I thought he was like rolling a t-shirt, just a regular guy, just like us. Now you need 20 agents, and there's 30 agents on Patel. There's another 30 of them on Bondi. You have like 0.6% of the entire FBI's agent pool. More than 0.5% of all the agents in the entire FBI are just doing security work. And that's a pretty cush gig, by the way, because you don't have to work cases. There's no paperwork in that. You just show up, you get paid shitloads of overtime, you get to fly all over the place, you get to go wherever the trip is, you fly in the jet. It's an awesome gig. Everybody wants it because they don't have to do work. And maybe some people need it. But the director needs to have some freaking balls. And I know the deputy director does, because wasn't he a former federal agent? Isn't that the story? That Dan was a former federal agent? Where's this guy? I'm just asking. Dan and I haven't spoken in a while. I'll show you why. If you guys don't know the story, we haven't spoken in quite a bit. I did my first public interview with him because what he told me was he wasn't going to let my story drop, because he took it on like a mission. He said he was like an evangelist and that he thought the problems at the FBI were national security problems for regular Americans. And I believed him. I guess shame on me. Dan Bongino, the FBI needs to be disbanded. Special agent testified that they paid a Russian entity, a Russian national called Danchenko, $200,000 to serve as the Trump dossier source. That's from Fox News, back when he had a Fox show. I was on his Fox show a bunch of times. I was on his radio show a bunch of times. I got booted out by a blonde lady who's ugly as hell, who looks like a tranny. She looks like this. If you guys are not watching, you guys might as well come check this out. This is what she looks like. Right? And she's a multimillionaire Democrat. Whatever happened to that? You want to know why we don't talk anymore? Because somebody who I trusted, who I asked some real specific questions like, hey, I'm putting my life into your hands here. I'm going to be going up against the federal government. I am going to reveal my name to the nation. And I didn't want to be a public figure. I was terrified of doing that, folks. I didn't want anything to do with sitting in front of a microphone or a camera. I flew out there, and on almost no sleep, my first podcast with Dan was done in the open, wearing a flippin' black t-shirt and a pair of jeans and a pair of boots that I used to wear into the office in Washington, D.C. And this is what he put out on his radio show because of Julie Kelly, who flippin' lied, who doesn't know what the shit she's talking about and is now going to discredit George Hill, who spent more honorable time on this planet than Julie Kelly has ever had in her imagination. Probably anybody in Julie Kelly's family has had combined. Whoa. This is what Dan had to say. I'll just play it I'm going to sit on the screen here and react to it a little bit. But this is why we don't talk anymore. because I haven't used my platform ever to go out there and do that. My platform's a lot smaller, no doubt. This is a pretty awful thing to do out on your big radio show that talks to a bunch of people. But this is what it's about.
About grifters, losers, zeros. You know, people who do strange things with Hot Pockets in their basement when mom's not around. There's a lot of... What are you laughing at, Jim? There's a lot of these, and, you know, I try to help people out a lot. I do. I try to do my best to try to, you know, give people a platform, because when I first started out in the business, I had people who did it for me. You know, Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, and others. When I was running for office, they gave me a shot. I mean, folks, when I say I was a big unknown, I'm not being dramatic about it. I'm being candid and honest. I mean, no one had any idea who I was, and people helped me out a lot. But sometimes it goes wrong, you know, and I think if you've seen what's happening with this former FBI guy, you see what I'm talking about. I mean, it's really a shame to see these guys just go from, you know, whistleblowers to, and then I guess they fall in love with themselves and just get crazy.
Yeah, who fell in love with himself? Anybody? You guys want to answer that out there? I'll take the comments. Do you know how disgraceful it is to have someone say that? That's called projection. That's what leftists do. What happened to being a show that where facts, they're not immune to the facts? I listened to the Dan Bongino intro hundreds of times, just like you guys did. A show that's not immune to the facts. No, they're not immune to it. They're allergic to it. Because the fact is that an FD 888 has a pre-filled in section that says you're going to use the deadly force policy. And the first thing that I ever said to Dan, and he fucking knows this, was that there's no reason that they ever should have done a raid on Mar-a-Lago. It should have been a consent-based search. They should have sought consent and done it that way. I always have been consistent about that. I was consistent when I spoke to Dan. I would have been consistent if I told Julie Kelly. You guys even missed the damn point. If you made an exception for Donald Trump, then you would have something as an exception. The real story at that time about the Mar-a-Lago search warrant is that they did treat Donald Trump like a common criminal, and that is something to be outraged about. You should have been flipping furious, and Americans, regular Americans, should have been on both sides of the aisle. If you treat the former president like any common drug dealer, like every search warrant that I've ever served, which had the same deadly force policy, the fact they did that was a gift. And it's the reason why he's in the White House right now. And who knew that God actually gave us a reprieve on all of this stuff? Because if we had Donald Trump not sit through the 2020 election and get removed, we wouldn't have had the contrast of what happened then and now. We wouldn't have him have the balls to go out there and do the tariff deal, because that wasn't happening in 1.0. You know that? 1.0 Trump was not about to do what he's doing today. He didn't have Stephen Miller working in the same way. I'm going to finish this thing out only because it needs to be done. This is like, every time I watch this, it makes me sick. It makes me sick that this guy said that, because there's a major apology. And anytime somebody tags me on a social media and says, well, you know, Dan, why don't you reach out to him? This is why. The apology needs to come from one direction only. Shame on you. You're at my former agency and you need 20 men to protect you. Don't ever claim to be tough because of that. That's weak. The director should get rid of the detail and the plane and fly coach like everybody else. I don't even care if he flies first class. The fact that he flies in a $60 million jet, show me that you want to be a political prince. They always say that power is the thing, right? You can find people that are your friends when you're down and out. You really want to find a test of a man's character, give him everything. Give him all the power and all the money. Give him a $60 million government jet, because we haven't heard from Cash since he stepped in. Now, I hope he's doing the right thing, and I want him to. And they still have a small opportunity. I'm going to tell you one more story that needs to be corrected. And they haven't forgotten about it, and I'm not going to let them. But this is the rest of that little clip.
It's just nuts. It's so sad. Julie Kelly is just a wonderful person. I don't know if you've seen the story, but Julie, and there's some donations, but the husband has a job. Hey, listen, I'm not vouching for any of that. You shouldn't, whatever. I don't, I make donations to Republicans, but Julie Kelly's work is amazing. And I'm going to tell you something. Jim, you know this as well because you and I communicate with her. There isn't a single person out there, I'd say her and Darren Beattie, putting them in a class by themselves, grifters, who have done more to expose the massive January 6th scandal than Julie. And if you're going to attack her on personal stuff, fine. She's a big girl. She can handle it. She'll take care of it. Nope, you did. But Julie, who's been a regular guest on the show, you would have no idea what really happened on January 6th, none, if it was not for Julie Kelly and Darren Beattie.
Are you out of your freaking mind? Do you know how I know what happened on January 6th? Because I was freaking in the FBI, you dummy. And that's the segue that you're going to talk about. The first thing we talked about. I know more about what happened in the FBI. I know more about the FBI, period, than Julie Kelly will ever know. And what I know is she's running cover for this guy right now. Someone called Stephen Jensen, who's the ADIC of the Washington field office. It doesn't matter if George Hill even remembered those conversations. It actually doesn't matter if George Hill was even on 60 plus phone calls with Stephen Jensen when he was the section chief of DTOS. We had him on yesterday because I gave him a chance to say his own words, because I let people defend themselves real easily. And I would get a huge kick out of Julie Kelly wanting to try to defend herself. But to be honest with you, if I saw her drowning in a river, I'm not that good of a person. I'd probably throw her a cinder block, because I don't care what happens to her. She's a shit human being. Last night, she went out for clout, and she did something that I've never seen someone do. She went out there and threw in the face of people a miscarriage from someone who was completely unrelated to this to re-traumatize. And so I had to go reach out to Annette and say, but I'm really sorry that Julie Kelly is trying to use your personal tragedy. Ignore these people. Protect yourself. Steve Jensen was the section chief from April 2020 to October 2021 when the Parents at School Board stuff came out. He was the domestic terrorism operations section chief. That means he was the architect of the terrorism enhancements that went along with January 6th, the end. The reason that Julie Kelly doesn't know that, and by the way, there's no history of her ever commenting on Stephen Jennings, because she doesn't know what the FBI is. She's never known what it was. So for the overwhelming understanding of it, why have we never identified this human being? I never looked into it because I don't care. But if you said, hey, who would have been the person that was in charge of the entire programmatic end of headquarters? I would have said the section chief. And they said, which one? I would have said DTOS. Why? Because I worked for the FBI and I know what the hell I'm talking about. And now Dan Bongino does too. And now Kash Patel does too. And they promoted this asshole to be in charge of the Washington field office. He took over the job that Sundberg was in before, and before that was Steve D'Antuono. Steve D'Antuono, who also helped be the top guy when they were doing the Whitmer case. And Julie Kelly, not knowing anything about anything, thinks that the front guy somehow has special knowledge, because here's what the slide is going to be right now, folks. The slide is going to be, we have to protect Stephen Jensen because he has special knowledge about the pipe bomber case. That's what she's floating out. Do you know how I know? Because the FBI told that to sources, their sources, which are all these grifters that are out there in the social media sphere. They're all going to spin this. So here's what's coming up in the next, let's say, 72 hours. Stephen Jensen is super important because he knows special things about the pipe bomber case. He was put in because he was a dissenting voice against the Parents at School Board meeting thing. That's not true, by the way. That's false. The reason why Stephen Jensen is there, the reason why that asshole who got the bagpipes was there, Dennehy. The reason all of these people who were all never Trumpers and or yes bureau, institution over constitution people, the reason why every damn one of them was there is because they knew Kash Patel way back when Kash Patel was in New York. That's it. Kash is leaning on old contacts instead of new contacts. And he's like, I knew you back when you were a brick agent. If you think that being in the FBI for 15 years on your knees and gagging on anything that's put in front of your face, because that's what happens to FBI management, every one of them says yes, and yes, sir, and how high. They all do it. There are so small numbers of people that have been given an opportunity to do the right thing and did the right thing. It is infinitesimally small, and most of them have been removed, and they don't work for the FBI anymore. And those are the people who should have been hired to come in and fix it, and none of them were. None of the suspendables have been fixed. That is not a cry. I don't care. I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet, and I won't sell it out. But the people that are in there telling you that cutesy time was over and that we should bury that place and scatter it to the four winds, or that you were about to see a deep state museum at the Hoover building, has not happened. Let me debunk this for you right here. Julie Kelly yesterday. I've spent some time this weekend reading transcripts related to Stephen Jensen. Yeah, sure you have. She said she did her own research, by the way. I've done my own research was one of her quotes. You don't have the ability to research who Stephen Jensen is because, one, you don't have the ability to understand the FBI. You never worked there and you just don't know it. And two, and maybe the most important piece of it, you don't have access to FBI personnel files. You don't have access to any of the casework this guy did. You don't have access to FBI agents. What you have access to are Dan Bongino and Kash Patel who have told you this. It's complicated. Yeah, he's there because he was the section chief. She's going to acknowledge something and then try to pivot like it's something that she understands. She has no idea. None. Here's another one. George Hill, he was a good guy, but he just didn't know what he was talking about. It's irrelevant. The man's position is the indictment of who he was and what he did. Period. Julie Kelly might as well be in this crowd. Put on your cowboy hat, saddle up, and go hang outside the White House and smile and do a TikTok dance with your freaking Epstein binder, because that's that. Or your Tranifesto, like Megyn Kelly. I'm going to take all those hits right there. You guys don't have to like it. You know what needs to be investigated? How about this? The FBI Agents Association, which saddles up to the director immediately. The agents who took a knee for BLM. This is the New York Post that covered it. You want to know what's really funny? If you go back, the first story where that was talked about, I went and found it because nobody else covered it at the time. It was the Washington Times. It was September 29th of 2022, and I was quoted in September. That was 5 days after I first took the story down with Dan Bongino. When I first spoke to Dan, 5 days later, Kerry Pickett released a story about the politicization of the FBI, the kneelers for Kneel Team 6 taking a knee with BLM protesters. Even on this screen, if you look up there at that picture, about a third of those people are not kneeling. Did you know that? All the kneelers got promoted. Every freaking one of them did. They all advanced to very high-level positions. And the person who covered, she actually got to be the executive assistant director of national security, Larissa Knapp. She was the number 3 person in the entire FBI. And now she has a cush gig working for the Motion Picture Association. She's part of the rating system. Everybody got promoted. Sarah Linton, the 400-pound female that was there, she was made a special agent in charge. That's 4 positions above where she was right there, or 3. She got moved all the way up. Amy Oakes, sitting in the back, Asian female, used to sit right next to me, really nice lady. Not a great decision maker, thought she was tough, but wasn't. Whatever. She got promoted to a CI supervisor on a squad out at a preferable location. Becca got sent out to a LEGAT position. All these people got promoted. Tatiana in there didn't. She didn't take a knee. How about that? Some of these people really need to pay. They all need to be identified. So how about that? How about you guys go in and show us the cutesy times over and you put that to work? There was a whole bunch of them. Anyway, you can go back 5 days after my first public appearance. I was calling this out. And it took, let's see, it took a month before the New York Post picked up the story and ran it like it was their own. That was James Gagliano. Okay, James Gagliano, no problem with him. But he's an OG Bureau guy that's going to defend the Bureau. And he even had a problem with this. These are the real corruption pieces. And then you've got the cover. All right. And why do I feel like I'm particularly irritated with the people like Megyn Kelly today and the Julie Kelly types? Maybe because I saw this clip. And this bothers me a lot. There are a bunch of women out there that are dancing around in the conservative space. Okay. And they're not married. And they are not conservative, and they don't live conservative values, and they say bullshit like this, and this is the reason why you are losing men in this country, why they're not going to be part of it. And by the way, every one of those female FBI employees that was on a knee out there or standing, every one of them got a job when there was a man that was fitter, stronger, faster, and more capable. But they got hired because they were women. If you don't think that's true, you don't know anything about law enforcement. If you're going to make tactics and fighting and MMA and warrior culture part of being in law enforcement, then you damn well better pick men. Because men can beat all the women out there. And if there's a woman that can beat the men, there's a man that can beat that woman, bar none. You know how I know? Because I've seen every woman on man fight at every Walmart, and your average fat guy can knock out a fit, spunky, spry young lady every time. And he doesn't even have to try. And we can't have that if we're being serious. Megyn Kelly talking about the problem with men. The problem with men is that you're just not going to marry women who have a job. No, how about we just value that women have more important work to do, and raising babies is the single most important thing that you can do. And I'm willing to slave at whatever it takes. I'm willing to dig ditches. I'm willing, which is my dad's expression, I'm sure of it. I'm willing to go work at Walmart. Steve Friend has applied to work overnight security at a hospital because feeding his family is more important and his wife should be there for his kids. That's what he thinks. Men go into the world because we are expendable and women are not. And if we got back to some real conservative values, we probably wouldn't have this grift crap. By the way, how many of these women are unmarried and out there flirting with the trad life, showing you their sourdough, and they're out there putting their face out like they have something to say? Go get married. Go out there and do what you actually say you do. Here's Megyn Kelly. This bothers the hell out of me.
Here's what's happening on the right. Young women, I talk to young conservative women all the time about their lives and their goals and, you know, the things that they want. And what's happening is they can't find men who are maybe more conservative. Usually they're looking for somebody who is religious, you know, like a lot of conservative women tend to be God-loving conservatives. And they can't find a lot of young men who want to marry a working woman now. And this is an actual problem that's coming up on the right. And to me, it's so sad because it's like, how did we get to the point where we're now telling young, conservative, amazing women that they're not attractive if they also work, if they choose to, let's say, do what I'm doing and what you're doing and like get their voice out there. But I'll stick with me just because I think conservatives listening to this will like the thought of another Megyn Kelly voice up and coming. Well, why wouldn't we want that? Why would we take somebody who's talented in this field and really wants to make a difference and have the messaging to her be, you're really not that valuable unless you give it up and go into the home and only have a family and only raise a family. And not only are we sending her that message, but young men are actually believing that. They're actually believing it, especially on the right.
Only have a family. Only embrace the superpower that women have that men don't. To give life to another person and to raise them with unlimited patience that I can't fathom. My wife is sleeping on a couch for the last 2 nights because we're potty training kids and she wanted to be close to them so that she could be right there. I don't have that sort of tenacity to do that thing. I'd be like, we'll just potty train them later. I got stuff to do in the morning. I don't want to sleep on a couch. I'm a grown up and it's not fun for me. Moms do stuff that nobody will put up with. My wife's aunt read engineering textbooks into a dictaphone and sent burned CDs of engineering textbooks for 4 years for her daughter who had a learning disability to be able to do engineering school. Do you know what kind of superpower that is? I want each of you to imagine opening an engineering textbook. If you've never seen one, go find one. They're about as dry as it gets. Then imagine reading hundreds of pages multiple times for years so that your child can go out and get a job in their chosen field. That is a freaking superpower. So only be a mom. That is the most insulting shit I've ever heard. And Megyn Kelly, who now has the Tranifesto, disgusting. Absolutely disgusting to me. I don't care if there's never another Megyn Kelly voice ever. I don't care. She's mistaken. The fact that people buy into it is because you guys buy into idolatry. That these people are your champions and you've nominated them. This goes all the way back as far as time. People have always wanted to see champions. They do the thing that I can't do. They say the thing that I want to say in the way I want to do it. Gross. Be careful who your idols are. Question all of them. You should. The left has their own. Here's their version of it, by the way. Megyn Kelly's Only Be a Mom leads to Tim McBride in Congress, a dude dressed up in a lady's pantsuit like some ugly budget homosexual male Hillary Clinton. And here he is talking about Medicaid and keep your hands off women's bodies. It's going to lead to dudes pretending to be women and saying, how dare you? This is how it starts. It starts with a Megyn Kelly and it ends with this guy.
And we are here today because while we know that Donald Trump thinks that he can place his hands anywhere, we're telling him, hell no, hands off our Social Security, hands off our Medicaid, hands off Medicare, hands off SNAP, hands off our kids, hands off women's rights, hands off LGBTQ rights.
Yeah, that's the same person that puts his hands on his dick in the women's restroom. Can we just be really clear about what you just heard women cheering for? It's a leftist talking point that being a mom is just not enough. It pisses me off and it makes me sick. And if you guys don't get it, stop following these people. That was the message that Dan ended with, by the way. Stop following these guys. How about stop believing in people and ask the questions? Where is that dude that said we need to burn it all to a pile of smoking rubble? Where's the cutesy time is over guy? Because I'd like to see him come back. Because I was rooting for Dan Bongino, even though we have a personal vendetta, which has to do with some blonde, ugly lady who looks like a tranny. How about that? How about that guy come back and do the job that we hired him to do, that Donald Trump asked him to do? And if he can't do it, he needs to be a man and say, they won't let me, instead of being a protector of an institution that is lipstick on an ugly ass pig. Because the FBI hasn't changed one bit, especially when you've promoted Stephen Jensen, the guy who ran the J6 terrorism end of it, directly to the most powerful office in Washington Field. That is like having a discussion about Dr. Mengele and saying, I know he killed a lot of Jews. He disfigured a bunch of people. He did open vivisections of twins, but he has some incredible insights about medical technologies. Hang him. That's the answer. That guy should be gone. There's no reason to keep it. All right. That's as spicy as we're going to get today. Hopefully that was fun for you too. I don't know. I don't even know if it's therapeutic. It just makes me sick. I'm showing this again. We're a one-man show, folks. This is what it looks like every morning. If you've never seen it, this is how we operate. This is an extra room in a regular house in the suburbs. Thanks for joining us over here. It's rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. It's youtube.com/Kyle Seraphin. Your support means you hit a thumbs up, you hit a like, you share the show wherever you're watching it. You can join us on Locals if you want to be part of it. Yep. Like, you guys paid for this desk, as far as I can tell. Like, that's how this all works. And you can share us on Spotify. It's KyleSeraphinShow.com. I am incredibly grateful that I get to go out here and have conversations that I want to have, say the things that I want to say in the way that I want to say it, because nobody owns us, because you, our audience. You're the reason why I get to do whatever I want to do and say the things that I think are true. If you don't like it, I appreciate that too. And I don't take away comments. I'll approve all your comments, even the ugly ones. So go ahead and put them out there. Put them out there at KyleSeraphinShow.com, which is the Spotify. God bless all of you. You guys want a palate cleanser? Do we need a cleanser? I feel like we need to. Let's do a palate cleanser. What about COVID? Was that COVID the opportunity for millennials to buy houses? This is a dark look at maybe we need a plague. So here's a little a joke for us to walk out the door on, because it's fun.
Dude, we're never gonna own. Millennials, Gen Z, y'all are never gonna own homes. And it's our fault. We fumbled the bag. Because for years, we were praying to God. God, please fix the housing crisis. Please open up the supply of available homes in this country. And then, in March of 2020, God was like, here's a disease that specifically kills old people. And we were like, no! Wear a mask! Save grandma! Stop the spread! Let it spread. Let God cook.
Right? That was an opportunity for everybody that's in the housing market and says, oh, I can't afford it. What's going on there? Yeah. That's it. Oh, great question on the chat, by the way, as we leave the show. It's not a teleprompter. It's a monitor so I can see what's coming out. So I'm actually talking to myself. I'm looking at you. You're looking at me, but it's actually me looking at me. That's all it is. I just want to know what's going out into the stream. So that's how I run this thing. I don't have to write any notes for this. This all comes out of the top of my head. I couldn't read that fast. I absolutely promise you. Anyway, God bless you guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for making the show what it is. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. I'll send you guys to the American Radicals podcast. I'm sure they are deep into it right now. So I apologize to Steve and Garrett. They have their own thoughts on this, but today was grenade day. So have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.